Welcome to Deciphering Growth, the show that explores mental health from every angle. We bring you conversations with personal opinions, stories, and practical tips. We aim to break down the stigma and help you live your best life. So please sit back and let's dive in. Before we begin, we want to remind our listeners that this podcast represents the opinions of Tiffany Graves, Eric Stone, and the show's guests. The content provided is for informational purposes only and should not be considered medical advice. Please consult a healthcare professional for any medical questions. The views and opinions expressed are our own and do not represent those of our workplaces. Listening, reading, emailing, or interacting on social media with our content does not establish a doctor-patient relationship.
All right, we're here again on a cold, gloomy Tuesday. Eric, you want to
Yeah,
introduce what we're talking about?
what a lead-in, thank you for that, Tiffany. I don't know how I'll top that though. We are going to get a little more into the seasonal symptoms we've been discussing with like seasonal affective disorder, but from a different lens, and we are going to be getting a little bit more into childhood trauma and how that relates to some of these symptoms and the holidays. So a little bit of a different angle a bit. So we are going to still be talking a little bit about the seasons, but rather than just the seasonal affective disorder, we're going to be getting a little bit more into how childhood trauma can interact with some of the seasons. So, Tiffany, is there anything you want to make sure that we start with today?
Yeah, so the biggest thing that I kind of had highlighted for us to talk a little bit about is the ACEs of childhood trauma. And I'm not gonna lie to you, my brain, my brain is blanking on the ACEs, the adverse childhood experiences, I believe.
Hmm.
Yeah. Um, and so those types of things, actually, let me just pull up the ACEs so I can like read them over. So
Yeah.
most of the ACEs focuses on physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, physical neglect, emotional neglect, household dysfunctions such as parental divorce, substance abuse, mental illness, witnessing violence in the home or the community, or discrimination is kind of what the ACEs survey covers. Um, and I kind of wanted to have a little bit of a running discussion about how those things can kind of set the foundation for childhood trauma impacts that we see prop up later in adulthood.
Yeah, I do think that ACEs relate to a lot of things. I think we're starting to understand more and more about trauma. I know that we are doing a project, Tiffany and I, of rereading The Body Keeps Score, and we'll preview it. It's
The struggle is real.
it is a task. You may notice the wording I said task, but we're going back through the Potty Keep score. But it does remind us a little bit of like how far we've come with understanding trauma and just like all the different ways. That book used to be very groundbreaking and just wow, this is so earth shattering. And we have just come a long way. Since this time. So I think that's just the nicest way I would say it. But we do know that there are lots of health outcomes and things linked uh, to childhood trauma, exposure, and different things. And I was looking up the date. 11 years ago, 2014 is when the Body Keeps Score came out. So that doesn't
Wow.
surprise me at all that there's been a decade of understanding trauma, understanding the nervous system, going into things. But yeah, no, trauma. we can't control if we've been exposed to trauma or not. For the local listeners, there is a wonderful exhibit at the Cincinnati Museum Center, kind of a functional health uh, presentation, and they've got different things on like how your lungs work, how your blood works, viruses, germs, but they also have a mental health uh exhibit and different things. But
Ooh.
one of the things there is a scale, and it is for adverse childhood experiences, and I really love this scale. I think it's one of the best ways of understanding kind of a complex concept, so I'm just giving them credit. I love the museum center for so many reasons, but this exhibit, the main piece of it is there's a spinner, and you spin it 10 times, and there is a positive, negative, or neutral, and you start off on the scale in the middle, and it can shift one this way, one that way. uh, but if you're leaning positive, neutral experiences don't impact you. If you're leaning negative, neutral experiences push you further down and they give examples of what positive experiences or negative experiences or neutral could be. So positive, growing up uh, in a safe environment, like that's a positive. Neutral could be, I need to think of some of the examples. I don't know if you have any examples, but they have some examples of what the neutral experiences could be. Um, having challenges adjusting 1 year at school, that could be a neutral experience. But if you're already leaning, and so I've done that exhibit a couple of times, like gone through the 10 spins, but the one that sticks out from the very beginning, I spun once and it was a negative, so I was leaning, and then I think I spun 6 or 7 neutral things, but it pushed me so far that direction because I was already leaning. And so you have, if you can think of the scale, each positive moves you back to neutral very hard once you're already going. And it's a very powerful illustration of trauma. I don't mean to say that we can't heal, but it just highlights how life is not fair, it is not equal for everyone.
Yeah.
And trauma tends to attract and build other things for lots of different reasons.
I feel like I need to like buy one of these. Probably crazy expensive, but I'm like, I feel like I need to.
It was on like a table. I mean, but I do just like I'll probably never forget because it's just one of the most powerful exhibits I've seen. Because I'm like, well, I'm a therapist looking at this, and you could take it as simple or as profound. But yes, childhood trauma impacts a lot of different things, and so we're kind of getting out of this post-holiday season. But why we wanted to talk about this is you may not know why you feel a certain way about certain dates on the calendar, or why you're stressed, why you're nervous. So I just don't want to steal everything from you, Tiffany.
No, but I mean, like, I'm kind of sad I haven't experienced this exhibit. I'm like, I feel like we need to make a whole episode of going and experience this experience.
Oh, I would
Um,
love to go. I have a pass to the museum center, so you will find me there often. I love the museum center. It's a great
yeah.
exhibit. Honestly, think everyone should see it at least once.
It sounds really profound, and I think it also like visually highlights how like neutral things, whether we realize it or not, can actually push us further into trauma sometimes, rather than like helping us move forward. Like it really it really highlights the impact of a negative mindset, whether it's intentional or unintentional, based on like an ACE's background of like how difficult it's going to be for you to function, to get into a positive, versus someone who hasn't experienced any of those.
Yeah. Um, You know, I just there's so many different holidays that can happen, so many different types of trauma that can also happen. Um, it there's just like, I mean, just so many. I mean, I'm just even thinking like maybe there was something going on with a caretaker. So then you spent one holiday uh with other people that maybe were your family, maybe in care, and miss out on something. So then when these times come up, it can be a very stressful reminder of some turbulent uh, seasons. Um, but like the holidays just mess with people for a variety of reasons. Like we're talking, we all know we mainly do better with routines. The holidays are a complete disruption of routines. And so food, presents, people, events.
Yes. That was one topic I had written down, is that scarcity mindset. Like if you have an ACEs background of childhood deprivation in any shape or form, the abundance that the holiday kind of pushes can be really overwhelming and can lead to guilt and shame about like whether or not you can afford it, whether or not like you know how to accept it, like how to deal with like so much extra stuff that one might not be accustomed to.
Yeah, I mean it could be just all if we just think of those things as stimuli, that's going to be very overwhelming. So like I mean I'm just thinking of if one has grown up with the scarcity of, not having enough food, not having enough resources, not feeling secure, and then you go to these there's just food everywhere or gifts or maybe even feeling like expectations everywhere. Like it can just be overwhelming. I mean, if you've never I mean, I can even think about going if it's a work party, you're going to a work party and you're there and it's like, what is this? This is overwhelming. What is all of this? So um I think it can just be very overwhelming. And honestly, you may not know that some of these things are there until you're maybe removed from them or maybe experiencing them. So if you've never really done holiday stuff because of childhood, but then you're marrying or a partner's family or something and they do different stuff, like you may be like, oh my goodness, what in the flim flam is this? Like what is
Yeah.
going on right now?
I know something that comes to mind for me as we're talking about this is when you have those holiday parties where there's just excessive amounts of food. And that was always something that even now when I see that, my brain is like, I know on a logical level, like the people here can't eat all of this food. And
Hmm.
so it's kind of like that, like internal discourse of like, how then do I process my own shit of like being angry about the food waste when knowing there are people who like potentially like has never had like turkey, for example, or some other holiday staple.
Hmm. Or like just not knowing like the attention on it. Like I mean, just even like not knowing like, okay, what am I supposed to do with this? How long do I sit here? How long do I do this? What it just this could be a lot of expectation and like maybe a feeling like an imposter or lack of belonging, I could think for a lot of people.
Yeah. It can be, I don't know, the holidays. There's one thing I guess like I know on some level the holidays fell as they fell just as like life happened. But, like, my brain is like, it's really weird that, like, the holiday, quote, unquote, "season," like, fell in, like, essentially the darkest section of the year, and I'm like, we're asking all these people to, like, go out, work more, do more, hang out more, party more, be present more in a time of year that's, like, typically difficult to do that.
Yeah. It's not a private. I mean, the holidays really aren't a private solo experience. So like you're going through this with other people. And, you may feel close with some people, but maybe not everyone around you as you're going through some of these things. Some of the interesting things too, just I think we mainly are talking to our audience of adults. Like, I mean, I don't know, maybe 5-year-olds listen to podcasts, but I'm like doubting it for a variety of reasons. But kids have different triggers, and I think we do understand some of this, but there are just these like I think there's not maybe enough understanding of like how trauma shows up for children, and I am by no means the expert on this, but it can be years later, like years later. Adolescence. It can be some of the trauma was a bit. You just they don't. It's not always a right after type of response, nor is it for adults. But I think people really kind of don't understand some of this sometimes. So um, I need to look up the case, but there is a very famous case of some YouTube blogger family. They went through with an adoption. Well, the child they adopted, the person they adopted, had a lot of different health complications and needs, and rather than honor that commitment to bringing that child into their family, they sincerely sent them back, and they got a lot of flack for it. But maybe that's something we can preview a little later. But you could just tell there was no understanding of like what has that child gone through, what has that person gone through. Uh, and that's not trauma informed. That's not trauma informed when it's like, well, what do we get from someone being there? What do we want from them? Like that's the opposite of trauma informed. Trauma informed is like understanding some people don't want to drink and they don't want to talk about why. Um, and that doesn't even mean they're in recovery. It may just be medications. It may be, that makes them feel unwell. But trauma informed may be like people may not come and it's not a personal slight or attack, or kids may not want to talk to you. And I think that's very just important as we're talking about this, is that there is not one way or symptom that trauma shows up as. There are trends, there are things, but you may not, you just different people have different levels they're going to show to some of this, which is why I think it's hard to make blanket statements that this is how trauma will show up or this is what the challenge would be.
Yeah. I think something that I guess professionally and personally have like adopted from a trauma informed lens is being able to recognize that like we all have independent experiences, and those independent experiences don't cross over and web into what other people are independently experiencing unless we allow ourselves to be overly enmeshed into what they're projecting outward based on their independent experiences.
Yeah, that's profound. I really like that. I just think like basically just don't assume. Don't assume that people like Halloween. I love Halloween. You can find me always dressing up. I love Halloween. But let's not assume that everyone likes Halloween or likes candy or has even knows what that is. And so, I mean, it sounds so simple. It's like a silly, I mean, some people it's spiritual, religious, but for a lot of people it's like a silly, have fun
Mhm.
day and holiday, but like just not assuming like everyone loves that. Everyone loves fruitcake. Everyone loves
Ugh.
to have to open a gift in front of everyone. And it's not a personal thing. Maybe if someone's not wanting to do something, that's the part maybe I would stress the most, is like the assumptions that we can make. It's like, oh, well, they're a jerk. Oh, they're mean.
Yeah.
They just may not be in the place to do that. And they don't owe you their story. I mean, even as therapists, we talk about we're not owed everybody's detail of everything. I think that's a misconception of therapy in general, is I will know everything about anyone that works with me as a client. That is not how therapy works. That's not even necessary for it. I may not even know every piece about the situation we're working on, because that's also not a requirement to do therapy or do the work.
Mhm. Yeah. You were talking about Halloween, and I was like, I like Halloween, but I don't. um, and it's not necessarily anything traumatic, but for me, like Halloween has become sad because I can't enjoy any of the candy that like people have on Halloween. And I guess from like my mind goes to like, man, what about kids who have the same like allergens and dietary restrictions that I have, and they're like, Halloween sucks because like I don't get to eat any fucking candy,
Right.
and I'm just going around like woohoo. Like,
It's a great, that's a great example. Well, and I just even think about maybe people who are like, I don't know, grieving something, grieving a
mhm,
situation. Like maybe that is a day that's super painful to them, that all these kids are coming up to their house, even if the lights are off or something. Like I could see that being painful.
yeah.
I mean, I do, I love working with veterans. One of the things I really think about, and I'm not anti people enjoying fireworks, but man, some of my veteran clients, they absolutely hate all the holidays where fireworks are going off, because they're not hearing a firework. They're hearing what sounds like a rocket. I mean,
Mhm.
a firework is a rocket, so it sounds like a rocket's being shot, and then you hear it going off. Like that is what
Yeah.
that it's a very similar sound to what it sounds like when they're deployed. And some of my client, some people I've worked with have survived such things. And so I actually don't enjoy the fireworks randomly people shoot off. I get the events and stuff, but I really don't like the random popping off, dogs getting lost. But like this is me though, right? So this is me
Yeah.
just sharing like I don't really have a trauma, but I just don't appreciate that. And so, like,
Yeah.
assumption could be, well, Eric's just being a jerk. He hates the fun and fireworks. But it's like, no, I don't. think the costs are worth the benefit, of
Yeah.
like some of the pieces that go on.
Yeah, I would have to agree with you. Now, I do like sparklers. Those can be pretty fun. But like I do have to
Yeah.
agree on the firework front. Like maybe like as a kid they were like, "Oh my gosh, this is so cool, the sky lights up." But as an adult, I'm like, "This is like kind of dumb." Like
Well, and
especially
I mean,
since we
I do love my neighbors, but it's like, do I want them randomly shooting rockets by my house?
no.
No.
I
Do
mean,
I want professionals shooting them like at designated times? Yes, that
see,
seems to be the vibe.
I
But
don't even want the we've come to the era of drones, and drones can make
mhm,
so many amazing cool things, and I'm like,
that's
why
true.
would we just not transition to drones that are like
I
healthy
wonder if that's like
friendly?
better for that's got to be better for the air quality too.
Well, I'm just thinking like how many more people we put into perspective and can actually enjoy events because we're not popping off random like loud
Yeah,
noises and
I
it's
mean, and
more
I get it.
intrusive.
Not everyone is a family of a veteran or is a veteran or works with veterans, but it's just, I feel like that's a very like I wouldn't even call that a sacrifice. Like I think what anyone who's been in the military has sacrificed is a sacrifice. I think this is just a reasonable accommodation of like I'm not going to shoot fireworks off randomly so that people don't have to deal with that. Just like, can you lean all the way back in your seat on a flight? Yes. Does now in 2025 that make you kind of a jerk?
I
I
have
would say
yet
yes.
I won't lie to you, I have yet to figure out on the many flights I have been on, I have yet to figure out how the fuck you lean your chair back. Like I like have like like pushed on it. I've looked for buttons and I'm like, am I just like am I so stupid? I can't figure this out.
Tiffany, this is like two episodes in a row where we're like, how did people sign up for the newspaper? And now it's like having,
I'm
I
sorry
mean,
you
some
mentioned
of
this,
them,
and every time I'm on a plane, I
no,
get frustrated. Like, why? Like,
some of them don't do it because I think again, it's like, hey, it's just a little sacrifice for everyone. So like, I don't want to see it in my face. I don't want to put so. I but I think that's just maybe my best way of explaining what an accommodation could look like. Just being um kind, and just
oh,
this is just kind of empathy. Like, what are some people maybe going through? What may they need? And I think we do. I think a lot of people understand kids need empathy. They don't know everything that's going on. They haven't gone through, but it seems like with adults that have grown, we forget that they were the kids that you used to be making a nice accommodation for. I would argue people still dealing with some wounds. It's not because they are being anything other than just a human being. They're just trying to figure stuff out. They're trying to work through things. It's nothing bad that they are doing.
yeah. Being human is just really fucking hard.
Yeah. So, just maybe just on the practical side of what does it look like trying to support someone? Just starting small, like giving out, don't try to sell them a car where you make it really hard
Mhm.
to say no. Just be like, hey, would you like to come sit with us, or would you like to sit out here and sip the cocoa or so? Just giving options and space, trying to think ahead of are there some spaces at a gathering that you can have just for people to step away, or letting people step away? They may just need to go outside. Um, Making it a child-friendly space, like giving some spaces for kids if there's going to be kids at the event. Thinking through some pieces, and you may
Making
not know everything.
I would also encourage making adult safe spaces. Like I like some people might like roll their eyes at that, but like making quiet spaces for adults that can step away too. Like some people might get overwhelmed by yelling, screaming kids. Some people might get overwhelmed by like a decent amount of people.
Yeah, no, actually, we're on the exact same page. I have a piece here about avoiding sensory overload. So, like, if someone needs to step outside to smoke, it may not be because they need to smoke. They may just want to take a lap or walk. I love my family. Some of them listen to this, some of them don't. I sometimes just need to step away, and not because I'm mad, just because I get fried. I need that reset. So I may go and do dishes. I may go and um, work on something, pick up something, do something because I just need the space. Uh, so the other piece is just like maybe making new traditions. Like how can you make a new tradition? How could you incorporate someone's tradition. I think people feel really supported by this. And just offering like a routine for routines during the time frame. So kind of letting people know what to expect. Not that you need to have a schedule of the day, but that's a common thing I hear a lot about is like what stresses some of my clients out is these blanket days where there's no set schedule and there's no idea of what's going to happen. Like that's overwhelming for a lot of people. So just even offering, hey, we'll have brunch, we'll watch the football game, we will then watch It's a Wonderful Life. I don't know, but just
Yeah.
offering some sort of thing to prep for so that someone's not just like, oh, I'm going to be
Yeah.
in this limitlessly. Like that would overwhelm a lot of people.
That would be me. My partner gets on me all the time. He's like, "You can't just like have a day when there's no schedule." I'm like, "No, my brain like flips its circuits. It needs to have a general idea of like at least we're eating dinner at like 2 or something."
Mhm. Well, and if we're just talking about trauma, like routines help us manage and like trauma is stored in the body and the brain. And so,
Mhm.
people, if there's nothing else people take away, like people aren't choosing what their triggers are. They're not choosing what they're hanging on to. I know, and I've met so many just amazing people and the traumas impact on them that they may be carrying. It's not a choice they're making. They're not like, oh, I would like to be social, but actually I just don't want to. It's not like that.
Mhm.
I know there's sometimes ideas that people are using that as an excuse, air quotes, that they've had things happen to them. Like, I'll be honest, there are some people who, have misrepresented what they've experienced or maybe used that experience in ways that shouldn't have qualified. So we're talking about being inclusive and safe and encouraging. But that doesn't mean like, oh, well, because you went through this, I need to go get you a PlayStation every Christmas or something. Like that's something where it gets too far. So while I want everyone to be supporting each other, like I think the nuance here is the level of support and what it gets into. But um, that's where it gets a little tricky sometimes because sometimes there are people who are hurt who are like, well, hey, because I'm hurt, this is what I did. Da, 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 da.
Mhm. Yeah, and like from a brain perspective, like ACEs can alter brain development and stress regulation systems. Chronic exposure to trauma can keep the amygdala in a heightened state of activation, which leads to increased anxiety and hypervigilance. Meanwhile, the prefrontal cortex, responsible for impulse control and decision making, can develop less efficiently, making emotional regulation more difficult. Your hippocampus, which processes memory and learning, can also shrink, affecting the ability to differentiate between past trauma and present reality. Additionally, prolonged stress dysregulates the HPA axis, which can lead to long-term issues with stress response, immune function, and even physical health conditions like heart disease and autoimmune disorders. And it like these neurological changes that happen from like trauma exposure can shape how individuals navigate relationships, they handle emotions, how they interact and respond to stress throughout their lifetime.
Wow. So Tiffany, what do you think is the main thing? Like, I know I've kind of shared the pieces of like, hey, if you're only going to remember this, like, what do you think is the main takeaway for just maybe understanding of trauma from childhood and like what people can maybe use when they're interacting with people that may have experienced something like this?
I would say the biggest thing is to keep in mind that like your lens is going to be a very different color from their lens. And there's the possibility that because those lenses are very different, you guys might not see the same experience or the same things on the same level. So, like something such as like an abundance of food might be triggering for someone and it might not be triggering for another person. And just recognizing that, like, okay, this person is viewing this differently. Their lens must be a different color than mine, and just kind of asking yourself, how do I support this person who's using a different lens to see this? Not necessarily trying to change their lens, but just being present and being supportive and like helping and accepting like that's just the lens that they were given in life to view things.
Mm.
I guess like this is gonna sound absolutely bizarre, and I promise I'm not crazy.
No,
But
no.
like the way I view like we all have like different eye color, right? So the way that I think about it is almost similar to like eye color. Everyone's eye color is slightly a different shade. Everyone's lens on life is a slightly different shade. So on some level, we're all just different shades of color that are walking around, viewing and interacting in a way that just makes sense for like the shade of color we're choosing to see life as.
Mm. I love that. Wow. Yeah, I think it's important. I think it's a good discussion. I think it's also something that can be a little overwhelming for people to try to talk about. Um, but I'm grateful for the conversation, grateful for
Yeah.
the
And
space.
I think a way like to think about it because I don't want people to feel like they have to like ask someone or have to talk about it. But like think about it in terms of like a rainbow. Like the colors on the rainbow don't talk to each other. They don't like try to accept the fact that purple is next to indigo or I haven't looked at a rainbow in a while. Yellow is next to orange. Like they just kind of accept like that's where they are in life in that experience and they like flourish together in that like rainbow pattern of colors. Like you don't see a rainbow being like, well, yellow's not going to be by green today. It's going to be by like purple or like blue. It just kind of accepts that like this is the life pattern and this is like okay. Not that rainbows are sentient, but that's a whole nother.
I love it.
Not to get way off track, but I guess too, like the other thing that comes to mind, and this might be again like bizarre, is like ants.
Mm.
Like ants can experience different traumas, like depending on like what they're doing, like for their colony, but you never see like ants like murder each other if like they're experiencing trauma. Oftentimes you'll see them like helping each other out, like figuring things out together. There was a really interesting experiment that was AI generated and ran with ants, and it showed that ants are more uh problem solving and communal than humans are when trying to figure out problems that involve teamwork, which is kind of crazy.
Mm. Well, I appreciate you, Tiffany. I appreciate the dialogue, and I mean, I am looking forward to the discussion about the body keeps score.
Mhm.
But I think that will be interesting to follow up on, especially after this episode.
Yeah, and I think that I haven't gotten very far because it is it's a task. Um, but it's some interesting concepts about like how trauma is was processed in that day and time. I think too, um, something to keep in mind is tools for helping people build emotional resilience during all seasons, but a little bit more so in the winter season since that seems to be like the heaviest of seasons. Acknowledging past trauma, um, whenever it resurfaces and doing your best to give yourself compassion over judgment. Journaling can help if you're a journaling person. Using mindfulness, deep breathing, or even physical movement to help regulate emotions when you're feeling overwhelmed. Um, engage with your friend, your support groups, or even a therapist to combat some of those difficult symptoms that you feel like you're struggling with. Um, and dive into new traditions. Don't be afraid to create new traditions, meaningful rituals to you that make more sense versus societal's standard traditions. And just, do your best to live your best life without other people telling you what to do.
I love that.
Did I miss any of your favorite
No,
tools or skills?
no, I think honestly it's well said, and I think, just starting from where people can is important.
Yeah. Well, I think that's kind of all that I got today. Like, making sure you're taking care of yourself is the biggest message. Anything we left out?
I don't think so.
All right. Well, until next time.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of Deciphering Growth. We hope you found our conversation helpful and insightful. Subscribe to our podcast for more episodes and check out our Patreon for more content. Don't hesitate to contact us on social media if you have any questions or comments. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, keep growing.